Hello, welcome. Thanks for joining us for another Paizo Friday. Hope you've, if you're in America, hope you had a good holiday week. Some of us got a nice day off right midweek and got to enjoy extra time. And I hope everybody else is going into a great weekend. Today, we've got a great show for you. I'm joined by Pathfinder Creative Director James Jacobs.
Yay!
Yay! We're going to be talking about a few things, actually. Starting off with talking about Planar Adventures a little bit, and then we're going to get into some other AP news, and then just a little chit-chat, and then some Q&A, if you would like to do that.
I would like to do that.
There you go. We're going to do that then. It's going to happen. So, first of all, James, welcome to Paizo Friday.
Yay, Paizo Friday.
Yes. Slowly, more and more people at work are finding out about Paizo Friday. I don't think most people know I even do this.
That's because we have to work on Paizo Friday. Well, you're working right now, I guess.
I am. This is really hard work.
Oh, yeah. It's tough. You have to sit down.
I do. And these new comfy couches.
I'm noticing that.
Yeah, it's like the quiet room now.
Yes.
So, and the baffling and everything.
Yeah.
It's just so quiet. So, first of all, thank you for being on.
Mm-hmm.
This is awesome. Second of all, this month, Planar Adventures came out.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
So I thought, at first I was like, hey, let's talk about Planar Adventures because it'll be new and it'll be awesome and let's do that. And then it hit me that we've got Return of the Rune Lords coming.
Yep, right around the corner, a couple months away.
You're the person to talk to about this.
Yep.
I definitely, in fact, when I'm on social media, when I'm doing all the social media stuff and I get questions about, hey, how does this thing work in Golarion and where does this thing go and all that kind of stuff, you're the first one I come to. I'm like, well, if it's going to be in the world of Pathfinder, then you're going to know that stuff.
Or I'm going to be able to make it up and make it sound like I know what I'm talking about.
You don't do that.
No, well, that's yeah, I guess. I get paid to lie.
Yeah, well, don't we all?
Yeah.
I mean, really. So that's the other thing is I was hoping we could get into is just some of those fun behind-the-scenes stories if you've got any handy about that, because to me that's really fascinating about the history and all of that stuff. So and then after that we should be able to have some time to get into Q&A. So hang on to those questions. Don't put them up just yet. We'll get to them shortly. So starting off Planar Adventures. Yeah. Right? So let me get a better camera angle. There we go. Let me ask you, how long has Planar Adventures been in the works? How long has this been an idea?
It's kind of been in the works and been an idea for a decade. We did the first version of it, not quite 10 years ago, The Great Beyond. It was a softcover book, 64 pages, where we just started talking about Golarion's outer planes and realities beyond the material plane, etc., and trying to give it a spin that was Golarion, that was uniquely Paizo's take, rather than something from one of the various Wizards of the Coast things from the open OGL and all that. Right. And as always seems to be the case, it was like a rush, we got to do something, we got to do something, got to do something. And so it made sense to me that I think it was on a Paizo chat channel where it was myself, it was Eric Mona, a couple other people, and we were all just talking about, and the question came up, how do the outer planes of Golarion work? And I basically said, well, in the homebrew, which is that I've been running since college, I have a model of the outer planes that's sort of similar to the Great Wheel of D&D, except instead of a wheel, it's more of an onion with the material plane at the center, and then everything else outside, layers of the onion just building upon itself. So like the material plane is surrounded by the plane of air, which is surrounded by the plane of water, which is surrounded by the plane of earth, which is surrounded by the plane of fire. All of that is surrounded by the astral plane, and then on the very outer inside walls of the onion are the outer planes. Okay. And then how like the ethereal plane matches into this and various other elements. And I just kind of rattled that all off, just and it freaked Eric out because he hadn't done really much thought into it, because we were still, a lot of our work was still trying to figure out what the Inner Sea and Golarion was about. Yeah, yeah. And so that was kind of the genesis for that being taken up into Golarion. And so we had Todd Stewart wrote The Great Beyond to outlines we created and all of that. That book came out at the very tail end of when we were doing a 3.5 version of the game. We were, at that point, we knew we were going into creating Pathfinder. Okay. And we knew that we were in a stage where anything that we would produce would be like, it would be in this weird section where if we put rules in there, that would be for the previous edition of the game, et cetera, et cetera. And so a book that was about the Outer Planes, filled with flavor, filled with all sorts of story elements and stuff like that, which is edition neutral,
right,
made sense to have this book come out at that transition. So we then did Pathfinder, and everything kind of started over from the start.
I've heard of this.
You've heard of this game?
Yes.
Yeah. Good. And so we kept going and going and going on there, and we were using, you know, the same. Since The Great Beyond was edition neutral, we could use all of that lore and just kind of use it as we needed.
Right.
We were talking about doing a planar book on and off over and over and over and over and over again. And it just kept getting put off, because we already kind of had all the information we needed. There was nothing, we didn't need to have any of this stuff out because we already had it. Mm-hmm. And then as we come up on the second edition and all that started creeping into, you know, the forefront of what we were thinking about, it started to pick up steam again for the same reason. It's largely edition proof. It's largely game proof. You could use a lot of the content for the Outer Planes and stuff in Planar Adventures in any game that has that sort of model of like other realities stacked upon our own.
Yeah, it's a building block.
Yeah, it's a building block. It's almost
right.
It's a campaign setting in itself because it's got so much information.
Okay.
About like different worlds, heaven and hell, and the abyss, and the shadow plane, and the first world of the Fae, and all these different like the dimension of time, the dimension of dreams. Just weird places like the Dead Vaults and the Akashic Record and stuff like that.
So it's like a homebrewer's dream. Like
Yeah.
It's just anything.
It's like anything is literally possible here because gravity could work however you want it. It's everything's up in the air, and it's fertile ground for doing whatever story you want. So So that was basically the genesis of that. My original outline for this book. So at a certain point, Jason Bullman and the design team were heads down getting everything ready for second edition. So a lot of the stuff I was doing at this point was like Planar Adventures and Bestiary 6 and Ultimate Wilderness, which had a lot of help from the design team, of course. But so my original outline for this book was, I think, a 346-page book. It was about the same size as Advanced Player's Guide.
Oh my God.
And every plane had like 10 pages in it, and there was going to be like city maps of all of these stuff, and we were not going to be able to afford it. There was no way we could have been able to afford the maps and the art for this thing.
Yes.
And so that basically ended up being like, that was like, I would love to do this. But then the cold clutches of reality got a hold of us, like, what can we actually do? We want to have like player options in here, even though it's a late edition game. We need player options there because there's information that we haven't really touched upon before. We need monsters. This is the last chance we have to get monsters into a hardcover book. And it struck me, for example, like we still hadn't done a CR20 Archon in the game yet.
Okay.
It was the one outsider race that didn't have a CR20 boss, boss character.
Yeah.
And so a lot of those just kind of fell in place, and the resulting book is Planar Adventures.
And then, so at the outset, how much of this would you say is carryover from like, hey, I found these notes from a long time ago, and put some of that in there?
How much of it? For the new rules for the player content, I'd say pretty much none of it.
Yeah.
That was all basically stuff that we came up with to fill like obvious niches and areas that we wanted to expand upon. There's some stuff in there that has been kind of bumping around, kind of in the background, that we've never really covered that well, or we haven't covered very efficiently. That we finally are getting in print here. Like one of the ones that's one of the last additions to the book was the Zyomorns, these vault builders and vault keepers, which are these powerful earth elementals that are the reason why on Galarian we've got this underworld of caves and giant vaults and stuff like that, that in defiance of the laws of physics, which say the deeper you go, the hotter things get, and earthquakes will not allow giant underground caverns. You can't really have a hollow world type thing if you have a world built on science.
Right.
So you need a kind of magic. So that was the original genesis when I was working on Into the Darklands, was that there was this elemental race of people that would use the underground as like big terrariums for their experiments. And I didn't have room to stat them up there. They eventually got statted up, spoiler alert, in the Emerald Spire Super Dungeon.
Right.
But I kind of just shoehorned them in there because I was like, I want to stat these up at some point, and I want to be able to want to do them because I've got ideas.
Right.
And so I put them into my section that I wrote the bottommost layer of that dungeon. And that's fine. That's where they lived for a long time. But they never got into a hardcover book. And they're such important creatures. They're the reason we have the Darklands. So they're the creators of a huge part of the setting. But they never got into, print in a hardcover book, into that prestige format. And so as I was working through this, I was like, we never put the Zion-Warriors, the Vault Builders and the Vault Keepers in a print. I got to make room for them. And at that point, everything in the book had already been spoken for, and I was already over on a bunch of stuff. So I had to, unfortunately, move the element-infused creature out of the book, which was something we'd already previously published in Planes of Power, a softcover book, and put the Vault Keepers in there. So those kind of guys kind of are a good example of something that's always been on periphery of the game, but has never really been out there in the because when we put something in a hardcover book like this, the amount of eyes that see it is just, it's a factor that above everything else. So
it's more official. It's got a hardcover on it.
Yeah.
And given the timing of this book, when it comes out, was there a sense of a last hurrah? Was there a sense of, I've always wanted to do X, Y, and Z? And
not really. I mean, we've always wanted to do a Planar Adventures book because that's the Planars are so myriad in their options and powers and diversity and everything like that. But it's not really a case of everything we want to do, we got to get into this book. It's more like this is the book a lot of us have been waiting to do a long time. Right. So, if I were to, there's something coming up in the very last first edition Pathfinder Adventure Path volume that is more in the category of last minute. We got to do it now, or we can never do it for first edition type thing. So you'll see more about that in. I don't even know off the top of my head what volume number that is, but whatever it's 143, I think 45. Anyway.
Okay.
That's something for months from now to talk about.
Okay. And to kind of roll things up into a nice little ball on the Planar Adventures, is there anything that you look on, when you go through those pages, you're just like, oh, that's such an awesome idea. I'm so glad we did this.
Kyle Hunter's maps.
Kyle Hunter does maps in there?
Yeah, all of the maps are there. Yeah.
No way.
Yeah, you didn't know that?
No, I didn't. He's in my Monday night group.
Oh, yeah,
I had no idea.
Well, then there you go. Surprise.
Well, all right.
That's maybe why he was distracted a few months back, because we had him working hard.
All right.
The tricky thing about doing a planet map is that it's a globe, and we have to present it on a flat surface. So you've got all of the different projections and stuff like that cause distortion and all that. And even then, it's on a single piece of paper, and you can't get a lot of detail into it on a planet and all that. Now imagine doing the same thing on a flat piece of paper of the entire universe. How do you do that?
Yeah.
And have it give any sort of indication of where Earth is, as opposed to Aldebaran, as opposed to Vulcan, as opposed to whatever different worlds you want to indicate on there. Now, imagine you're trying to map something that contains the entire universe and every other possible universe.
Right.
So you can't do it. You can't really do it. And we had this problem in the first softcover of The Great Beyond, where we did maps of the Outer Planes, and they basically just looked like somebody picked up a bunch of terrain and went onto a piece of paper. And it's like Elysium and Nirvana, and they all looked the same, and that's a shame. So with this one, we went to Kyle, and we basically, because Kyle is the guy that did the art for the Hero deck, for people that aren't familiar with his work, and if you're not, you're a terrible person. You need to check him out because he's awesome. You're great people. You're all great people.
No, you're right. I stand by it. Kyle's amazing.
Yeah. So one of the things I went to him about is he's a huge gamer too. Obviously, he's in your game. So it's I can go to Kyle and say, I need maps of the Outer Planes, and I don't have to tell him really anything else, He knows what I'm talking about, and a lot of what we've done with the Outer Planes, because he's been working with Paizo forever as well.
Right.
So when he did these maps, the idea wasn't to do we're not going to show an entire, the Abyss with its 6,000 different realms. Right. give us give us a map that shows kind of the themes of it, like the stories of it. Like for the Maelstrom, the idea is that this is churning vortex of reality that is swirling around this antipode that is cycling off all of the remnants of reality back into the positive plane to be recycled into souls. And how do you map that? And so he got this thing with this big giant whirlpool with all these islands kind of stretching around it. And they're not labeled. They don't have like any like, you know, Sandpoint is here, Shadow Absalom is here, Dis is here, the four gates of heaven are here. They don't have tags on that because that's irrelevant.
Right. Yeah.
They're basically, you look at them, you get the feel for what the plane is like, and it inspires you. And then we have more traditional art opening each one of these sections as well. So you've got this pictorial map of the plane and a more traditional art piece of the plane that when you work together, you know, pictures are worth 1,000 words, and that's 2,000 words that I crammed in these sections. So.
Right, yeah, absolutely. Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
All right, well, and if anybody has any questions about Planar Adventures, let's hang on to them. We'll get to them later. And last but not least, this is out this month.
Yep.
So look for it. It should be out very soon, I think, probably.
Yeah.
Then I think some people are probably already getting it.
Yeah, some people already have it, like the PDFs. It's always weird for me because I've been in the industry now since, working in the industry since Wizards of the Coast. I was at 1999, so it's been, what, almost 20 years.
Oh, wow, yeah.
And in that time, my perception of when something is available has just been completely mutated because when we're working on a product, you know, we're seeing it build up at the time, and by the time we get to the point where we send it to the printer, it's kind of this weird slurry in your head about what ended up actually in the book and what got cut because it was awful or because it didn't fit or whatever. And then it's sent off to the printer, and then immediately there's 3 books that are already late that you have to work on right there.
Right.
And so once it's off to the printer, you're like, whew, you're gone. I don't have to worry about you ever again.
Done.
And then at some point, magic happens, and all of the warehouse folks who are just awesome and how great they are at getting things, customer service, everybody, that's when they pick up the slack, you know, the next step, and it goes out to people, and I just never know when people get it.
Yeah, I have the same issue with what people have spoiled and what they haven't spoiled. Like we were talking about I was putting together the show for today, and it was like, oh, you know, what about this? And you were like, I don't think that's out yet.
Yeah, it might be.
Okay. Yeah, it's just hard to know. It's like I maybe it was out. Who's to say right now?
Yeah.
And so I totally understand it. And then we get it. You know, we get a digital copy.
Yeah.
You know, when it comes back.
Yeah.
And so.
And as the creative director, I get one of the 3 copies. When they're done being printed, the printer sends this to us. It's like, here they are.
Right.
Your very last chance to say stop if we screwed it up.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And so I get one of those copies like before a lot of other people even get them. So it's like, I don't know.
Yeah. So
it's so tough being able to get them early.
This is so rough. How do we do this, man?
First world problems.
But yeah, anyway, when I first started here, I thought the printing process was actually really fascinating. I mean, all the proof. There's like one that's just a white copy, and all that. It's really crazy.
It's fascinating, but
I think it is. I think it is. And really quick, just someone in the chat. Really, nobody is getting the playtest early.
No.
The employees, we have it.
Yeah, because we made it.
Because we made it, but it's not leaving the office. It's definitely here.
Yeah.
So really, just us, and by us I mean we can have it, but it has to stay here in the office.
Yeah, we're not even allowed to really take them home at this point. It's still on lockdown. I mean, we just had a meeting earlier where we were talking about, like, some of the GMs who are running organized play, they need the rules a little bit earlier just so they can prepare to run those games for Gen Con. And it's like this weird thing. It's like, well, we don't want to give it out too early because that gives more room for like things to just slip or get whatever. We don't want to wait till the last minute because then they can't present the game in a way that makes it look fun because they haven't had a chance to prepare it. But it's really until Gen Con, which is 3 weeks away, which I don't have to worry about because I don't get to go. I don't have to go. I escaped. But it's pretty close. I mean, yeah, you've been waiting for months already to play this game, and it's less than a month away. So.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited about everything that's coming up. Yeah. Especially, you know, Gen Con, that's one of the best things about Gen Con is, I like Gen Con. Yep. It's really hot and all that, which I do not do well with the heat.
Oh, yeah. The heat never really bothers me. Crowds kind of freak me out.
And that's the other one is crowds. Luckily, you know, my job is I'm usually running around, so I don't get pinned down to one place. But you just like we save so many good things to release during Gen Con, and
Yeah.
so just the whole atmosphere. So yeah, I'm expecting I'll see a lot of folks.
That is one
at
thing.
Gen Con there.
I've been to plenty of Gen Cons and all. That is one thing that I will say that is amazing about conventions. Is like when you get a lot of feedback and stuff like through the internet. There's a lot of just gross stuff on the internet, and it's if 5,000 people say you're great, Dan, and then one person says. Your glasses are a little crooked. That's going to be the thing that annoys you.
Way harsh, James.
I know.
Harsh.
It's terrible. But
look,
at conventions, we never really we'll get people that are really passionate about things like, oh, let me tell you about my character and all that. But they're excited. They're there because they like us and we like them.
Yeah. So. And that's the thing. I feel like, but we're getting really far off on it.
Oh yeah. That's true. Okay.
Anyway, suffice to say, Gen Con's awesome. You're gonna miss James. James will miss seeing everybody there. But a lot of stuff is coming out at Gen Con, which we're really excited about.
Yep.
Something that's not coming out at Gen Con.
Right.
Unfortunately.
Right.
But soon after, I think still in the month of August?
Yeah, it's always in the August.
Yeah, perfect.
We originally decided, we're talking about, right, Return of the Rune Lords.
Yes, absolutely, we are.
So we originally decided to release our Adventure Path Volume 1 at Gen Con, because obviously, why wouldn't we? And the first one of those, it was in August, and so we did Burnt Offerings, Rise of the Rune Lords, and went on and did this thing. There's 6 parts, so the next one always started in February.
Oh, right, okay.
Which is like, whatever. And then, so that let us, since they always have to be 6 parts, that let us every year launch one at Gen Con, which was really fun because we get to talk them up. We get to like say, the new Adventure Path is out. You can buy it down in the booth, and here it is right here. We hold it up.
Yeah. In fact, there it is right there.
But increasingly, for whatever reasons, I don't know if it's like global warming or like alien manipulation or whatever, they keep creeping Gen Con up. And so it's coming, it happens like at the very start of August or even in July.
Yeah. It's got a typewriter at some fact, right? It's got a like,
or something like that. But so it's frustrating. Increasingly, we've been having a hard time getting our Adventure Paths out at that point. But I think we're probably going to be pretty busy anyway this Gen Con.
Yeah, I think so.
Some other product or whatever.
I don't know. I mean, the chat's been talking about it since we started talking, but whatever, it's fine. So let's talk about this.
Yeah.
So for those of you that might have played it, so these that may not have played it, everybody, what are the Rune Lords?
The Rune Lords are a group of 7. It's a group of powerful evil wizards, and they ruled this nation called Thesulac. Way back 10,000 years ago, it was a nation built originally. The idea was that it was going to be this nation ruled by wizards, which brought together like different races, humans and giants and elves and different ethnicities, and they'd all work together to create sort of, not really a utopia, but a place that is better than the ancient nation of Aslan, which had a lot of like humans are their best and humans only and whatever.
Right.
And so they basically were exiled from Aslan, came to the mainland of Avestan and set up Thessalon, and that lasted for a couple hundred years until, of course, it all went bad. And the 7 Rune Lords, who were the governors of these 7 nations in Thessalon, basically went bad. They embraced sin. They, greed, lust, wrath, all of the good stuff.
Yeah.
They all basically they turned against their leader, King Zin, and transformed this place into this horrible, oppressive realm of just evil wizards ruling the world. And that went on for over 1,000 years, and then Earthfall happened, blew up the world. The Rune Lords basically saw this coming and like, no, we're out. They went into these little like hideouts, bunkers, and they're like, we're going to go in here. Once the end of the world is over and everything's back to normal, you guys will let us out and everything like that. But they underestimated how violent this, an asteroid hitting the planet a dozen times is going to be.
Right. And
nobody was left to let them out. So they were stuck in there for, 10,000 years. And in Rise of the Rune Lords, one of them wakes up. Okay. And that's Karzug, the Rune Lord of Greed. We went through this whole thing, and there's not enough really time even in one day to go through like how we associated all these schools of magic with the different colors of sin or colors or sin, types of sin and all that. Anyway, so Karzug wakes up. Rise of the Rune Lords happens. It's about your player characters coming into beat him down and defend the world and prevent him from waking up and causing a new age of evil magic users ruling the world.
Fair. Okay.
So that one happened. It was pretty popular.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yay. And at the very last volume of it, we've done this for every 6th volume. So if you open up any final part of an adventure path, and you check way down here at the bottom of the legal text, there's always like a little hidden message. And at the bottom of Rise of the Rune Lords, it was the Rune Lords will return.
Okay. It's like the end of.
It's like the end of a James Bond movie.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say
So we keep putting like these little like secret lines in there and stuff like that, and some of them get really obscure. And so the plan always was, there's 7 Rune Lords. We did an entire adventure path about one of them waking up. The plan was always the other ones are going to wake up eventually. Mm-hmm. We did later on, at about halfway through, 5 years later, we did the Shattered Star adventure path, which is a sort of a sequel to Rise of the Rune Lords, and that this is one where the people of Varisia are like, well, we know there's other bad Rune Lords out there. We got to recover this magic artifact, rebuild it so that we're ready for when they come back. And that's the Sihedron, the 7-pointed magic star thing. Mm-hmm. And again, that was always intended to be kind of like, there was a trilogy in my head, right from the start.
Right.
And with Return of the Rune Lords, that was always kind of in my head, the adventure path we would use at the very end of 1st edition. Because it's the type of thing that like it closes it all out. Whether or not people are still interested in playing 1st edition, they're going to want to read this thing at the very least. So it kind of builds in some sort of, excitement that people want to read about it. But as just timing and everything worked out, we didn't want to launch this not at Gen Con. So it's like, well, we've got to do this not the last one, because that one doesn't launch at Gen Con. We want to do this on the penultimate one.
Right.
And then, of course, it's not going to launch at Gen Con. So whatever. But yeah, so in Return of the Rune Lords, is the 3rd in this series, and there's some crazy stuff in there. There's time travel elements in it. There's player characters are going to have to face off against multiple Rune Lords. Like some of them might not be people you want to fight against. Some of them might be people you want to make friends with, or like enemy of the enemy type situation.
Okay.
The order in which you are confronting these Rune Lords does not necessarily match their power. You don't have to wait to the last adventure, perhaps, to get to the toughest one. Sort of. It's all sorts of weird stuff. Another thing that really kind of is weird. We normally don't assume the outcomes of previous adventure paths. But we can't in this one.
Yeah, no.
Because it's baked into the fact that previous player characters have played Return of the Rune Lords, or Rise of the Rune Lords, and Shattered Star. So we had to figure out a way to incorporate your previous characters from previous campaigns into the plot of this adventure path.
Regardless of the outcome.
Well, we had to assume it.
Yeah.
We had to assume that Karzu got killed and you didn't, lose everything.
Right.
But that means that there's a bunch of 17th level player characters out there in the wild. Why don't they just do this adventure path? So we had to come up with a reason why they're not handled, they're not taking care of things. And it's all spelled out in the player's guide for the Return of the Rune Lords adventure path, which hopefully will be available sometime in August, about the same time the first volume comes out.
Okay.
But that'll have rules for like how you determine who these previous players are or characters are, and what their relationship to your new characters are, et cetera, et cetera. You could, in theory, if in your personal incarnation of this, if you've played Rise of the Rune Lords and then say 30 years have passed, 25 years or whatever, and then you start Return of the Rune Lords, you could play like the children of your previous player characters even if you want.
Oh. So the timeline could be intact. It could
Oh,
still...
it's intended to be intact, yeah. That's awesome. Absolutely.
Okay.
And so there's a lot of elements that we're picking up from previous adventure paths that we're pulling forward. And then there's ancillary stuff like, at one point in Return of the Rune Lords, you go to Korvosa. So it's like, who's ruling Korvosa? It's not Queen Iliosa, because we assume that's happened as well. But you'll see.
So then is there a, just off the, without being spoilery, obviously, is there a good overview that you could give of Secrets of Rodricks Cove, which is written by Adam Daigle, who is in the chat right now.
Where is he? He said fair.
He's talking, they've got their own conversation going
on.
So
all right.
They're good. But just a nice non-spoilery
All right, so
overview.
first of all, the weird thing about spoilers is I think a lot of GMs get a little bit too worked up about spoilers because
I think you're right.
If your players don't have any idea what the adventure is, they're not going to be able to make characters that fit that adventure. They're not going to want to play it. You know, that's what movie trailers do. They give you enough context that you're like, I want to see that. You can absolutely do a trailer. I'm not going to mention, say, I don't know, any movie that Ryan's. Let's not call it Thor Ragnarok because that. Anyway, certain trailers can give away a little bit too much. But so yeah. With Secrets of Rodricks Cove, this is set in the town of Rodricks Cove, which is a small town. It's about the same size as Sandpoint. If Sandpoint is like the younger sister of Magnamar, Rodricks Cove is the younger sister of Riddleport. So it's a place where a bunch of piratey stuff goes on, but they're kind of like a small, happy little town. Not much is going on. This adventure has the player characters either being locals, they've grown up in Rodricks Cove, there may be new people coming there. They basically, in the first encounter, I'm going to spoil the first basically setup a little bit. You go to the market and a gang fight between two groups like starts up. Some of them may have like sort of like runes that they've co-opted from like certain rune lord type elements. And then just as things are starting to get to a head, the ghost of Rodricks Cove, Sir Roderick himself, the guy that founded it, rises up and starts and so if anybody out there, I assume some of the people listening to this have played Pathfinder, you know that ghosts are not really a fair thing to throw at a low-level party.
No.
So we throw a ghost at you in the very first encounter. And the rest of the adventure is basically trying to, you know, figure out what is this ghost trying to do to us? Why is he so freaked out? We got to deal with him before he comes back and really starts to, you know, come after us. And what are these gangs? What are these rival? There's like 2 or 3 gangs all kind of clashing together. The original title of this, I think, was Gangs of Rodricks Cove. And we kind of threw that one out because Secrets of Rodricks Cove kind of has this more mysterious quality to it. It kind of even ties back to Secrets of Saltwater or Sinister Secrets of Saltwater, whatever. Anyway, old D&D adventure. And so yeah, then you basically it's a huge sandbox at that point. The ghost attacks. You see a bunch of gang members just attacking each other. You are going to be friends with a character named Madrani, who is a elven gravedigger who's kind of mopey and not creepy, but mopey and sort of depressed. And she's like one of your initial allies. And at that point, it's basically something's messed up in Rodricks Cove, and you guys have to go figure it out. And the order in which you go through this is kind of up to you. So it's pretty sandboxy. It's really easy for your first level characters to like go into the end game like right in the first day.
Just stumble in.
Yeah. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. I mean, people always say they love sandboxes. So hopefully, and then as things go on, once you play through this adventure, you start finding these secrets, and when you learn these secrets, they'll propel you into this ongoing plot that is unfolding across all of Varissia. And it's really kind of, we don't have a lot of the quest giver element going on in this one. A lot of it is increasing like you figure something out on your own and say like, well, somebody's got to do it. It's got to be us.
Right. I like that. That's really good, especially if the motivations are there. And there's nothing worse than when the GM is trying to get you to do that on your own. There's no motivation to do it.
And of course, that doesn't work for every table. We've got potential, as with every adventure path, we've got allied NPCs that can step in and say, hey, go do this.
Right, I like that.
Which helps. The game, I was playing a Starfinder game last night, and we could have used an NPC like that.
Someone just to
we ended up going to a nightclub, and my character got hit in the face with an actual club, and
a clubbing at the club.
Yeah.
I
mean, it's in the very name. It's a nightclub. I shouldn't have been surprised. But yeah.
Dang it. All right.
I got my second T-shirt ruined. It's Darby machine-based. T-shirt broke. Anyway,
that's awesome. And then and just because I liked the cover and we had it, I grabbed the image for it came from Hollow Mountain. Which also looks very cool. I'm showing folks the cover of that.
Yeah, we're putting all 6 Rune Lords on the covers. The first one had Elasmus, of course. This one's got Rune Lord Kroon, the Rune Lord of Sloth. He's kind of the sad sack.
Yeah.
No, actually, I'd probably there's a few sad sacks among the Rune Lords.
So it's not just stuck with one person. And this is probably something we wouldn't even be able to really overview right now without.
We can overview. There's a certain amount of it came from Hollow Mountain is itself sort of a spoiler. It tells you that something came from Hollow Mountain.
Right.
And people who have followed our game know that Elasnest is associated with Hollow Mountain.
Right.
It is, of course, a deliberately chosen gender-neutral and non-specific word, so it could be multiple things coming from Hollow Mountain.
Yeah. The collective it.
You're probably going to go to Hollow Mountain at some point, I would say, in this one. And it's... we're trying with the Return of the Rune Lords Adventure Path to give a pretty good mix of like exploration style stuff, social type stuff, dungeon crawly stuff, urban encountery stuff, planar adventure stuff. But in a couple of cases, there's a big pile of dungeons for you to explore.
Right.
And it came from Hollow Mountain as one of the two with the big piles of dungeons. So.
Interesting.
But at the same point, we tried to present them in a way that they're not completely linear. You can tackle them in different directions, sort of a sandboxy element. There's NPCs in there that you can talk to or learn more about. Each one of these volumes, you're going to be able to piece together like bits of pieces of history of the Rune Lords. And then this very first one, for the first time, we are printing a timeline of Thesulac, which goes from negative 6533 AR up to the modern day. So this basically lists all of the basic major events that happened during Thessalon. The previous thing lists all 39 Rune Lords that have ruled over that year. So we're basically, all of the information is coming. The very last volume, if I can pull it off, is going to have a map of Thessalon before Earthfall wrecked everything. So this is the first time we basically published that.
Oh, that's awesome. So. Okay. See, and those are the kind of things that I find when I'm chatting with folks about history and the building blocks of what became Galarian and the stories and the settings and all of those surrounding areas and stuff like that. Those are the things that people are really curious about. Where does these parts of history, what falls into where, what builds that block, that wall,
Right.
And I think that, putting these things down finally and saying this is where you can find it. It's really a big help for a lot of people.
We're doing something also with this first volume. We're putting into the very first volume of Return of the Rune Lords sort of a GM's background. We always do like the list. Here's like a super brief summary of the 6 adventures, so that if you want to run the adventure right when you first get the first volume, you've got a vague idea of where it's going.
Right.
We've got a 6-page article in here that talks about all 7 Rune Lords, how they prepared for the end of the times, what they're up to. So it'll really help GMs who want to run from day one, plan ahead and foreshadow and kind of anticipate what's coming.
Yeah, absolutely. So then, does it seem like the kind of the idea of a lot of or the theme of Return of the Rune Lords is going to be more sandboxy and more open?
It varies.
Okay, all right.
It's not going to be sandboxy throughout the whole thing. This first volume, Secrets of Rodricks Cove, is very sandboxy, in which you can pretty much tackle all of these things in whatever order you want. The second one is a little bit more constrained. Like you can tackle whatever dungeons you want to go to. The third one, Rune Plague by Richard Pett, is basically kind of, the working title of that was Varissia World Tour. This one you're going to Magnamar, Riddleport, Corvosa, and Caramaga. And there's adventures happening. There's basically 4 chapters in this adventure.
Okay.
And there's 4 mini adventures happening in each of those 4 cities. Hopefully people are cool with the way we did that, because we're not able to give robust information about those 4 cities. We've got books of these, like Magnamar and Caramaga and all these stuff out there if you want to expand it. We really had to hyper-focus on each specific area. One of them's got a big dungeon crawl. One of them's got a big festival that you got to go to that is pretty fun. But the order in which you go to these cities is up to your player characters. If you do them in the different order than the book intends, you're going to be hit with more powerful stuff than you can probably handle.
Right.
But then you can back and forth and go different directions.
Nice.
The fourth one is probably the largest dungeon crawl of them all. That's Temple of the Peacock Spirit.
Right.
That one is not really sandboxy at all. That's a big dungeon crawl where the region of the Peacock Spirit's temple and all that is you explored and all that, and there's a lot of minor side missions to go on in there and everything. And then I've just started working on the 5th installment, City Outside of Time. That one's got a pretty linear path through, but once you get to the central section, it's sort of a sandbox where the directions you go is up to you and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
The last one is the last one's the crazy one. That's the Rise of New Thassalon, and we got Greg Vaughn to come back and write that one. It's been a while since he's done a full adventure. I think Midnight Isles is the last time he did an adventure, and even then he and I had to team up because neither of us had the amount of time to write the full thing, so we had to half and half it.
Right.
This last adventure is kind of the reason why throughout the past 10 years when people say you should do a time travel path, I've had to say no, we're never going to do a time travel because I've always intended to have time travel be a huge part of the storyline. You look at Rise of the Rune Lords, there's time travel elements, and there's even more time travel stuff in Shattered Star. In this one, in the last volume, your player characters are going to be time travelers. You're going to be going through time to do stuff that is pretty insane, and the ramifications of what your characters are doing in Adventure 6 causes encounters in Adventure 5, 4, and 3 to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So as you're playing through from this direction, chronologically, you're going to start getting hit with accidents and stuff that you did over here at the end that are coming back to bite you. And so that's been pretty interesting, seeing how those things are manifesting and like damage to the time stream. At a certain point, your characters are... I'm starting to get a little bit into the spoiler element, but it's like, well, let's just say you're not going to be able to rely upon knowledge history checks as much because the time stream is messed with your head. So there's some fun stuff.
Yeah, and you know, it is one of those things, like for me, the thought of moving into a time traveling narrative always gets scary. It seems like, you know.
Because it's like, if you time travel back too far, you're not in the campaign setting we just published 600 books upon. And so you need a new book.
Yeah, yeah.
And if you do something, like step on a butterfly, those 600 books are no longer relevant. So it's a tricky subject.
Yeah, it's true. That is very true. All right, well, let's...
To a certain extent, one of the things I'm trying to do with this element is like, show your player characters why time travel isn't a good thing. So it's like, we do it here, but you don't want to do it again because it's bad. There's Hounds of Tyndalus in the books. So, I mean...
Yeah.
You don't want them coming after you in your first level.
And that's the big one.
Yeah.
So then, moving on to Sandpoint, which is it's a really important area. Can you tell us briefly some of the history?
Yeah. Sandpoint, when we first did the first adventure for the adventure path, we wanted to have a town basically be the place that your characters would want to live in. You would want to defend it. You would come to love it. And that meant we needed a lot of characters and stuff in it. And so when I was writing Burnt Offerings, I did what I could to build Sandpoint up to be a nice place for you to enjoy. And I drew a lot of just my own... I grew up in a town called Point Arena, which is... translated from Spanish, Punta Arena is point bar of Sandpoint.
Right.
So a lot of the elements of Sandpoint are drawn from like my own childhood or weird things. Like for a long time there was a beach in Point Arena where you'd throw your junk off the edge of the cliff into the ocean. And the whole idea, or the idea of like there's a sign out front with a mirror that says, "Please see yourself as we see you before you come into town." That they actually had that in like 1890 or whatever, Point Arena.
Wow. Okay.
So there's a lot of stuff in Point Arena that translated in. And the reason Miko Kaijutsu is in as like a expatriate from Minkai is because of elements in Point Arena's history with Japanese fishermen sailing across the ocean in like 1913 in a tiny little boat to come to Point Arena. So there's all sorts of stuff in there. And then with upcoming Sandpoint book, I'm basically just saying everything I need to say about it. Almost all of the secrets are out in this book coming up. We've got an incredible picture of the skyline of Sandpoint that I think we've got. There it is.
Yeah.
This is one of the most amazing pictures that I've seen. It's just staggering. It's got everything in it. You can see the rusty dragon right there in the middle. Sarah likes to joke like, "There's me down in the corner by the tavern." And I was like, well, that's the brewery right there. So I don't care about the brewery because they're making beer. I want it to be where the beer is already done.
Right.
That makes sense.
And you know, the thing is that the image looks so much better in the book.
Yeah. We're opening the pages 2 and 3 is just that picture.
Yeah, it's gorgeous.
Really cool. My original outline for this book was like a 400-page book.
Really?
So this one's only 96. So there's a lot more that I could tell about Sandpoint, but I managed to condense it down pretty well, I hope.
So that seems to be a running thing.
Yeah.
I submit this.
Yeah.
And then this is
kind of. I mean, we're already like, it was like 7 o'clock at night now. I've been talking forever. So.
Yeah, exactly. So then, seeing as how Sandpoint has such a connection to your childhood and all of that sort of thing, how autobiographical could you call this book in terms of geographic memory? Like, we
it's
get
pretty
to
close.
this corner and then that's over there.
It's not physically much like that. I mean, I named some of the streets are like Schooner Gulch is a road near where I grew up. There is a lighthouse in Point Arena, just north of Point Arena. It's not ruined, but it did fall down during the 1906 earthquake.
Oh wow! Okay.
There's it's I believe the tallest lighthouse on the California coast.
Okay. Are you from California?
Yeah. This is Northern California.
Yeah,
Point
from
Arena
Southern
is.
California.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Southern California.
Technically central.
Okay, that's a little less awful.
So Pismo Beach and
okay, that's cool.
Santa Maria.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I also, of course, didn't want to like pull too much in and like make it too obvious. I wanted to get a lot. There's not actually many goblins in Point Arena, for example. Not a lot of dragons. There needs to be in an adventure. It's a lot safer to live in Point Arena than Sandpoint.
Oh, well.
But that's another thing that this book does is it explains why there's so much monsters in Sandpoint.
Right. At least there's a good motivation for the monsters to be there and all that sort of thing. So, but yeah, I think that as far as like looking over that image and really checking out what the Sandpoint area looks like and all of that stuff, and then you look at Sandpoint has been around in Golarion for ever, like for so long, from the very beginning. How long has Sandpoint been something that you've been constantly building and then rebuilding and changing around and all that stuff, or was it pretty built from the very beginning?
Sandpoint was a town in my homebrew. The player characters never really went there that much. I kind of just threw it in there because I was like, this is my hometown. This is where I just got whatever. Right. I like all game masters, like I'm writing novels and stuff like that. So I had certain stuff taking place in Sandpoint, at least in my head. I dropped the word in here and there with some of the work that I did with other companies, like the town name, but it's always been kind of changed every time it incarnates. The way that Sandpoint exists in Golarion was built specifically for Golarion, the street layout, the characters and all that stuff, and are uniquely created. They're not exported from my campaign setting necessarily. Okay. Although Amico is sort of a character that I ran in a Planescape game at one point.
Right.
Who had a kobold samurai cohort, which is pretty awesome.
Well, there you go. Okay.
Got another samurai to commit seppuku by shaming him. But anyway, it's pretty much was built specifically for Golarion from the ground up.
Okay. All right. And kind of always meant to be a major important hub and all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And then and actually we have been talking a lot.
Yes.
Unfortunately. So we're coming up on about 10 minutes. I wanted to, we could do some quick Q&A if you want to.
Yeah, I'd love to.
And while we're so if you've got questions over anything we talked about or anything that James is well versed in, then go ahead and throw those into the chat, and we'll see what we can do with that. In the meantime, I wanted to show I did a little bit of research.
Oh, geez.
And I was looking around, and this cover came up.
Yeah.
And this is dungeon number 12.
Yep.
I believe it is from 1988.
Something like that. Yeah, it's 88, I think.
Okay, 1988. And the reason why this is important to people watching right now is because there was a little story in there that you could have played called Scepter of the Underworld by our very own James Jacobs.
Yay!
As far as I could tell, this was the first.
Yeah,
this was your first published.
This is my first published credit. I had in I think it was Dragon number 111. They mentioned that we're not going to be publishing Adventures in Dragon anymore. We're going to launch an entire new magazine for just Adventures. And I was I think 12 or 13 at the time. I was like, ooh, that sounds awesome.
Let's do it.
I immediately started sending Roger Moore and Barbara Young just proposals for Adventures and Adventures and Adventures. I got one. I think the second one I sent them, Roger Moore said, I'd like to see this. He didn't know I was 13 years old at the time.
Right.
that one was basically all about like invading a mind flayer outpost and all of that. And I wrote the entire adventure out, and he sent it back and was like, we can't use it this time, but here's ways to grow and all of that.
Right.
So I didn't let that stop me. I kept sending him in, sending in. And then Scepter of the Underworld finally, the gimmick there was that it was a solo adventure where, you know, you kind of choose your own adventure style thing where you play a character through and go on this mission for somebody who's named Elasnist.
Okay.
So
yeah,
I don't know if you can read on this if the screen there, but yeah, the evil drow lich that you are roped into working for in Scepter of the Underworld is Elasnist, who is a character from my homebrew setting.
Okay.
Whose name I basically stole for myself to give one of the rune lords in Galarian.
In Galarian, yeah.
So, you know, gender swapped, different race,
Yeah.
different focus, not a necromancer, but a evoker, but just as mean.
Yeah.
And as it turns out, Elasnist and Scepter of the Underworld wanted this powerful scepter called the Scepter of the Underworld. Elasnist in this version is all about using another powerful scepter that you may have seen in our Artifacts and Legends books, the Scepter of Ages. Which may or may not tie into the fact that there's time travel stuff going on.
So essentially, these all take place. Scepter of the Underworld and Return of the Rune Lords. It all takes place.
So one distorted fever dream just like combined together.
Yeah.
Just like a snake with a vest comes out at one point, and like there's like these giant sandwiches rain down from the sky and they're crawling around.
I love that.
Oh wait, that's a different dream. Never mind.
It's so cliche, but I love when that happens.
Yeah.
So, actually, so we got a really good question in chat. Will Return of the Rune Lords be weird for players who haven't done either Rise or Shattered Star?
No.
No?
No.
Should
it won't be weird for them. They won't have really any ties to the previous heroes. In that case, you as the GM will need to come up with who the previous heroes are. We can't publish pictures of your characters in this book because we don't know who they are.
Right.
So we are basically having our iconics, Mauricio, Sione, Valoros, and Kira, play the roles of those heroes. So you'll be basically just using those characters as people your players can perhaps meet during the course of the adventure.
Okay.
So it won't really be weird so much as, I mean, they'll obviously miss out on the nostalgia elements and all of that, but it's all self-contained. So you don't have to play the previous ones to enjoy this one.
That's good. Okay, cool. So, yeah, no, play away. You're all good. But then also get them and catch up and play later.
Yeah.
You know, they're not going anywhere. You can still play with those.
And I mean, you know, it strikes me, I never thought of this before, but there's time travel elements in this. If you finish this adventure and you're like, that was fun, now I want to go play Rise of the Rune Lords or Shattered Star.
Wouldn't that be okay?
You could have like some sort of broken time travel thing, catapult those characters back in time to when they were first level and have them play through one of the previous, I don't know.
I mean, let's be honest. Anything with time travel tends to be broken on some level.
No way.
Think about it too much.
Time travel's always awesome.
King of Rock has a good question. What was the origin of the Sandpoint Devil? Is that a secret that's out?
I think that's a secret that's out. That's Wes. When Wes and I were originally the people that were in charge of the adventure path, with a little bit of help from James Sutter on the fiction side of things. But in those early days, we didn't have any proper nouns. We had basically the open content of the monster manual to populate our adventures with, and that's not enough. So that's we just started showing proper nouns of the walls, and just whatever ones stuck were good ones. But both Wes and I are huge fans of using. It's egotistical to build a game where you fight monsters and say the only monsters in the setting are ones that I made up, because you've got thousands of years of human culture building monsters for you. And so if you look back through history or through literature or through mythology, there's plenty of monsters out there already. And that's something both Wes and I have been a big fan of. That's why you see just obscure monsters from folklore and stuff popping up and all that. The Sandpoint Devil is basically our version of the Jersey Devil.
Right, okay.
And so the idea of that there's this like creepy witch who made a deal with the devil and then had a kid that was a wolf-jawed, bat-winged, snake-tailed, fire-breathing horse, basically, is the story behind the Sandpoint Devil. So
okay, all right. So I'm seeing. I'm trying to make sure I'm not missing any questions up.
Oh yeah,
past there anywhere, because they can go kind of fast sometimes. But let's see. Are there still people who worship the good elemental lords? or are these or are these deities dead?
So the original idea I had for in D&D, there's 4 good elemental lords and there's 5 evil elemental lords, and they kind of like exist in opposition to each other. And my original concept for the Pathfinder element of that was that the evil elemental lords killed the good elemental lords, so that's only evil elemental lords left.
Okay.
That has since evolved so that the good elemental lords weren't necessarily killed; they were basically imprisoned. So they're still around. You can still worship them. They're actually all 4 of them are illustrated in. No, the 4 evil ones are illustrated in Planar Adventures. We haven't illustrated the good guys yet.
Okay.
But yeah, you can certainly still track them down and worship them, and I believe they're all probably still alive. I don't think we've done much about them though.
Right. Okay.
I know Pathfinder Society has done a fair amount with them, so that's where you should probably go to get more information about that.
PFS. They have a lot of good information. Usually. So, anything else that we didn't cover yet? Is there something you wanted? To talk
there's all
about
sorts of
while
stuff. Well, I mean, if there's questions we missed or something like that, I'm always answering questions on my Ask James Jacobs thread on Paizo.com. So if you,
I was gonna put because supposedly there's a Twitter account for you. And I was going to put that in the announcement.
A Twitter account for me that Paizo built for me?
No, it's like a Bigfoot something. Or...
Oh, no, there is a Twitter. I do have a Twitter account.
How active are you on that Twitter?
I'm not.
Okay, that's why I didn't put it in there.
If I remember correctly, I made that account specifically so I could friend somebody so that person could have more friends than somebody they were in a friend contest with or something like that. I don't remember the exact details. It was like years and years ago, and I never use it.
Yeah. Okay. So probably don't worry about that. But hit up the message boards.
Yeah.
You know, there's even an Ask James.
Yeah, the Ask James Jacobs thread.
So hit up that thread, and it's pretty vibrant. There's a lot of stuff going on.
I'm pretty good about answering questions as soon as they pop in, and if I can answer them, I don't really do rules questions there because it's not really an appropriate place to answer rules because we have to frame rules answers specifically as errata and kind of manage them.
Yes, and now it's because I get a lot of rules questions on social media.
Sure.
And most of the time I'm like, well, go to the message boards and see if there's an answer to that.
And they're actually the answer for all rules questions is what your GM says is the answer. Yeah. And I really want GMs to be empowered. I want players to respect their GMs and let GMs basically be more active in helping things out. Because if you're playing the game and you get to a rules conundrum,
right?
Your GM needs to be on the spot and solve that situation to keep the game rolling.
Absolutely.
If you stop the game and wait for somebody who wrote the thing to answer, your game's done.
Yeah, it's going to grind.
Yeah, it's no longer a game, it's an argument, and that's not fun. Well, for some people it's fun, but is it?
Yeah, is it? Yeah, that's true. Well, we're rolling up on 5 o'clock right now. Thank you so much for joining me, man. This was a good time. I always enjoy those shows where it just seems like it went so fast and we're already done.
Yeah,
so
I'd love to do one of these again whenever.
It was really fun. So thank you so much for joining us, everybody. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. And thank you so much for joining us talk about all of this stuff. So for Paizo and for James Jacobs and for me, your old buddy Dan, thank you so much for joining us. Have a good weekend.